In the last few months, there has been a trend in the YouTube scene, and that is a trend of iceberg videos. Now, when you think of icebergs, you may think of those things that float somewhere in the ocean, I think. But in this trend, it is something a bit more sinister. It takes the concept of a normal iceberg where you could see the tip of it, you could see the surface of the iceberg. However, how icebergs typically work is that beneath the surface, it is way more deeper and way more darker than it may seem. And to the depths of the iceberg are ideas and stories that you may have never heard before. In today's video, I am going to go through the darkest football iceberg. There will be multiple tiers to this iceberg. Now, of course, iceberg videos can go in two different forms. One is from the most known to the least known. But for this iceberg video, I want to go into topics that are relatively all unknown. And in this video, I will go into the most tame to the most sinister. That is why I will be adding a disclaimer right now that some of the topics I will be discussing are very serious and very sinister. And also another reminder that there will be topics here that are very well known and obvious that I will be leaving out. For example, the Hillsborough disaster, I will be leaving that out of this because the purpose of this video is showcasing stories that are relatively unknown. Of course, the Hillsborough disaster and many disasters like it that are well documented, it is absolutely devastating. However, for the purpose of this video, I want to shed some light onto some topics that you may not have known of before. So, with that said, I hope you guys do enjoy. If you're new here, please hit that sub button because we are building a great community here. And if you guys do want more videos like this in the future, then comment down below what topics would you like me to go into next. I may be doing a part 2, and football is a very rich and diverse sport with many stories that are still yet to be told. And also, if you can, to help the video reach some more people, then let's try to hit 3,000 likes. Thank you so much for your support. Of course, quickly, for about 15 seconds, the long-time sponsor of the channel, U7Buy. If you want a good team on FIFA 23, you're in the need of coins, but you don't want to actually go through the effort of playing a game, then go down below to U7Buy and use code Vizeh at checkout for 5% off. The tip of the iceberg. Vatican City FC. Vatican City is the smallest city in the world of only a landmass of 0.49 square kilometers or 0.19 square miles. Of course, the Vatican is a city-state ruled by the Pope, which is at the center of the Roman Catholic Church. So the idea of them having a football team seems quite strange. However, you'll be fascinated to find that they actually do have a football team. Their first official international game was against the San Marino Amateurs, and it led to a 0-0 draw. I never knew that San Marino even had amateurs, but there you go. Their biggest official win was beating a Chinese under-23 squad 4-3, and their biggest defeat was a 21-4 loss to Borussia Mönchengladbach. I'm quite impressed they scored 4 goals. Lasagna Gate. In 2006, Tottenham was a point ahead of Arsenal. They knew a win would see them qualify for the Champions League. They stayed at the London Marriott Hotel in Canary Wharf the night before the game. Overnight, 10 members of the squad informed the club doctor that they had endured an extremely rough night, with a number of them violently sick. The night before, they had their evening meal involving a buffet which had a lasagna. Many of the players selected to have the lasagna. With 10 players of their squad violently sick, Tottenham Hotspur pushed to postpone the game, but it was not possible. Despite opponents West Ham being happy to delay the game, Tottenham's players were clearly affected by their illness and they lost their game 2-1. Arsenal beat Wigan 4-2, which meant that Arsenal qualified in the Champions League ahead of Spurs. Potentially the most Tottenham thing I've ever heard. Failing to qualify top 4 because of lasagna. Conspiration 1958. In 2002, Swedish director Johan Lofstedts released a film titled Conspiration 58. In this film, he made a claim that the 1958 World Cup wasn't held in Sweden and was all a conspiracy. It was never in Sweden, but rather was staged in the USA as part of a Cold War era experiment into the power of televised propaganda orchestrated by the CIA, FIFA, and powerful figures within the television industry. The key piece of his evidence are the suspicious buildings that lurk in the background of footage from Sweden's semi-final victory against West Germany. Buildings that he argued was never there, and actually lie on the other side of the world in LA. Further proof can be found in the length of the shadows cast by the players, stating that they are not consistent with the angle of the sun in the Swedish summertime. However, after it was released, the director Johan admits that he set out to playfully deceive his audience, but had more serious intentions. They wanted to joke about something as stupid as denying the Holocaust, so they decided to pick the 1958 World Cup and created a mockumentary. Despite the intentions of this being a mockumentary, people still perceive that there is something wrong about the World Cup. R9 Ronaldo seizure. In the 1998 World Cup final, Brazil was getting ready to face France, the host of the tournament. The tournament's top goal scorer and one of the greatest players of that generation, R9 Ronaldo, was rushed to hospital, with that to this day has only been described as a seizure. Brazil and the entire footballing world went into a predictable meltdown. Rumours coming out from the coaching team that Ronaldo was foaming from the mouth in his hotel room. The initial lineup before the final did not have Ronaldo's name on there. However, suddenly, after that initial lineup, Ronaldo's name popped up in the team. Of course, conspiracy theories abounded immediately. Football fans being well aware about the Brazilian team sponsor Nike and its well-intertwined relationship. Ronaldo, the poster boy for Nike, an aspiring superstar at only age 21, ready to play his first ever World Cup final. Conspiracies led to accusation Nike forced him to play the final. In that final, Brazil went on to lose 3-0 to France. Ronaldo's statement years later discloses his thoughts on that day. "We lost the World Cup, but I won another cup. My life." Johan Cruyff kidnapping. Dutch legend Johan Cruyff helped the Netherlands qualify for the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, but did not appear in the tournament. For a long time, Cruyff's disappearance from the World Cup has been one of football's greatest mysteries. Was it an injury? Did he fall out with the federation? Or was it political? But it turned out to be none of these things, because in 2008, he revealed that he and his family had gone through a horrific kidnap attempt just a few months before the finals. Johan went on to say that assailants entered his house in Barcelona and tied him and his family up at gunpoint. One of the gunmen pointing a rifle to his head. In Cruyff's own words, the terrifying experience changed his attitude to life and played a big part in the reason behind his no-show in Argentina. Thankfully, Cruyff and his family managed to escape and the kidnapped attempt failed. As you might expect, this had a lasting effect on Cruyff. He never played for Juventus in the first place. He was just a lad with a lot of imagination and Photoshop. The lie went so far that he was signing autographs, was developing football fields, and collecting money that he claimed he would give to youth development. Shortly after, he deleted his social networks, and the lie of Dionisio Rodriguez, the fake Mexican football player, fell into oblivion. 2010 North Korea propaganda. Now, I'm sure that you've seen these clips go around about North Korea depicting that they beat Brazil 1-0 in the 2010 World Cup, which of course in real life that was not the case. There is also another publication, alleged to be from North Korean TV, stating that they actually got out of the World Cup groups in 2014, in which beating Japan 7-0, USA 4-0 and China 2-0. However, I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news. However, it is found that both of these cases are indeed fake. For example, the 2014 video was indeed a prank made by a Brazilian YouTuber called Sindelar. Even though it may seem like an interesting thing to imagine, sadly, it is not the case. AS Adema 149, Le Ren 0. In 2002, there was an incredible match in the Madagascar League. There is a backstory to this. Le Yen was the title holders at the time. However, in the match before, they drew 2-2, conceding a late penalty, conceding that penalty in a controversial fashion. Had they won that match, their final game against their rivals AS Adema would have been the title decider. Everyone involved in Le Amiens was furious and they decided to protest. It was predetermined before kickoff and, long behold, they scored 149 own goals. The Madagascan Football Federation banned the coach involved at Le Amiens. He was banned for 3 years and 4 players until the end of the season. One of the players banned was the goalkeeper, who was at the time the national team captain. And that is the story of the most baffling scoreline in football history. Gregoire Axelrod. For every aspiring footballer, your dream is to play in the Champions League, and at times you try to achieve that dream. Axelrod was so bad in his youth that his father banned him from playing the sport from age 10 to 18. Axelrod knew that he couldn't get any success in football with his ability, so he got creative. Gregoire created a fake website where he pretended that he played for Paris Saint-Germain reserves. He would copy and paste his name into top flight match reports, replacing names including Nicolas Anelka. Axelrod, at the time, was working at McDonald's aged 19, going as far to sneak onto PSG's pitch and taking official photos with him in a full kit. He sent the CV to multiple clubs, which he managed to receive 6 trials in the UK. This was at Swindon Town, Bournemouth, Norwich City, Poole Town, Falkirk and Dundee United. He somehow scored a goal and ended up giving an interview on Sky Sports News. Swindon, sadly, did not give him a contract. However, in 2009, an opportunity came up. CSKA Sofia has just qualified for the Champions League. They offered him a 3-year contract worth £15,000 a month. However, the move sadly fell through after he signed the contract and published on the CSKA website that he was signing. CSKA Sofia fans went on PSG forums asking for opinions about Greg, in which they all were completely baffled about who this guy even was. Sadly, the club caught on and the move fell immediately. Bena Tashadi versus Basanga. In October 98, there was a football match in the leagues of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The scoreline was 1-1. The game was being played during a storm. During the game, a bolt of lightning struck the pitch. Footage can be found of the event that took place, with several players rolling around in agony. Despite reports that led that 11 people died from this online, that is simply not the case. Immediately, accusations of witchcraft arose. Many teams across Central and Western Africa are known to employ the services of witch doctors to put curses on their opponents. A true freak accident, and one of the most insane ways for a match to be postponed. The body. Narco ball. In the 80s and 90s, Colombian football was dictated by gangs. Drug cartels owned every aspect of football, from the leagues to the national team. This is, of course, the story of Pablo Escobar, head of the Medellin cartel, and bankrolled his beloved Atlético Nacional until his death. This enabled Atlético Nacional to win their first ever 1989 Copa Libertadores. For example, in 1989, there was a top-of-the-table clash between América de Cali and Independiente. Bragging rights were up between both sides. Everyone knew that the cartel money was sustaining each other's efforts on the field. After 90 minutes, it led to a 0-0 draw. Pablo Escobar was furious of some of the referee's unfavourable decisions towards his team. Alvaro Ortega completed the game, packed away his whistle, his black uniform, and his boots, and never returned to a football match ever again. He was murdered that very evening. In the 1994 World Cup, Colombia had a big game against USA, another example of their influence on the Colombian national team. After losing 3-1 to Romania in the first game, they had America in the second match. If Colombia loses, they are sent packing. So the cartel made their move, delivering a message on national television stating that there will be fatal consequences if Gabriel Gomez played in the next game. The coach had no choice but to leave him out, and Colombia went on to lose 2-1 to the Americans. Mark Vivian Foe. In 2003, the Cameroon midfielder was playing in a Confederations Cup match semi-final against Colombia in France. In the 72nd minute, the 28-year-old fell to the ground unchallenged. He was treated on the pitch before being stretchered off and receiving further treatment, including mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and extra oxygen. Foe was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This isn't the first footballer who has passed away on the field due to heart-related reasons. However, this certain incident is one that I remember very vividly when I was younger watching YouTube in 2008, and to this day it still stays with me. Justin Fashanu. Fashanu was an English professional footballer who was the first professional footballer to be openly gay. He was one of the first footballers to command a $1 million transfer fee. He signed for Nottingham Forest and had a few problems with Brian Clough. According to his autobiography, Clough, it would appear, was disturbed by the rumours of Fashanu's visits to gay nightclubs and bars. His goals and then confidence dried up as he failed to fit in with the playing and lifestyle demands of Brian Clough. When Clough discovered his homosexuality, he barred him from training with the side. Later in his career, he went over to America. In March 1998, a 17-year-old claimed to police that he was sexually assaulted by Fashanu himself. The police went out to arrest him, however by the time they got to him, he already fled to England. On the 3rd of May 1998, Justin Fashanu took his own life. In his note, he denied the charges, stating that the sex was consensual and that he fled to England because he felt he could not get a fair trial due to his homosexuality. El Salvador versus Honduras. Have you ever heard of a football match that led to a war? Well, in this story, this was the case. In 1969, a playoff took place in Estadio Azteca in Mexican City. Tensions was high between the two nations. On the line was a place in the 1970 World Cup, but in reality that is quite irrelevant because these tensions were started much earlier. A war potentially sparked by football was formed due to unfair treatment of migrant workers and settlers in Honduras from Salvadorian immigrants. The deciding match entered the 11th minute of extra time. El Salvador's Mauricio Rodriguez scored the winning goal, resulting in a 3-2 victory for El Salvador. Whilst the team did go on to play in the 1970 World Cup, 10 days since the game, El Salvador dissolved all diplomatic ties with Honduras. In Honduras, almost 12,000 Salvadorans was forced to flee the country. The war between the two nations went on for 100 hours, leading in over 3,000 deaths. The Darkness. The Death Match. The Death Match is a name given to a match played in Kiev, otherwise described as the Ukrainian people versus Nazi Germany. In 1942, during the height of World War II, Germany occupied Ukraine. They had an idea to stage a football match between a German team and the Ukrainian champions Dynamo Kiev. The Kiev team was rounded up by an officer while other citizens was being executed. In the first match, the team full of Ukrainians played the German outfit and Kiev went on to win 4-1. The news of the defeat reached the German officers and they insisted on a rematch. The Kiev players were banned from training and their rations reduced, and 5 days later they took the field to play an even stronger German team. Kiev and the Ukrainian people yet again, while being threatened with execution, they beat the German team 6-0. Hearing this news, they insisted another rematch and brought in a professional team from Hungary to play for the Germans. This was to restore pride in Germany. The malnourished and untrained Kiev team played 3 more games, in which they won 5-1 and 3-2 5 days later. The Kiev players knew they had to win every match because their lives literally depended on it. The German officers insisted another rematch. This time the unbeaten German team, Flakelf, were brought in to restore pride. The match was played in front of a stadium of entirely German soldiers. No Ukrainians were allowed. The Dynamo Kiev players were warned before the match: lose and they will be spared, win and face execution. Kiev went on to win 3-2. As the players walked into the dressing room, they knew their fate would come. A Gestapo officer informed them that they'd be given one more chance to lose. Dynamo Kiev played the match of their lives and they won 8-0. After that match, they were rounded up by the Gestapo. Many lost their lives, many sent to camps, and few survived. This squad of men defended their country and inspired Ukrainians across generations. A statue dedicated to the Kiev team in 1942 stands in Kiev today. Togo versus Angola. In early 2010, the Togo national team was on a bus on their way to face Angola in the African Cup of Nations. The squad, including Premier League star Emmanuel Adebayor, was on that bus. On their route to Angola, the bus was ambushed by Angolan rebels. Gunmen with machine guns fired on the bus carrying the football team, wounding 9 of the players and killing 3. The 3 was Amulete Abayo, who was the assistant coach, Stanislas Aklu, who was a TV sports presenter, and Mario Ajua, who was the bus driver. 15 rebels took part in the ambush, and it lasted 30 minutes. The head of the Togolese Football Federation said that they were shot like dogs. The Angolan government minister called it an act of terrorism. The reasoning of why this occurred is still complicated. Sources stating that the attack was not aimed at the players themselves, but at the Angolan forces at the head of the convoy. To this day, this still holds a scar on African football. Matthias Sindelar. Sindelar was an Austrian striker in the 1930s, nicknamed the Paperman due to his height and slim build. Sindelar made 43 appearances for Austria, scoring 27 goals. Following Austria's occupation from Germany in 1938, Sindelar declined to play for the new unified team despite repeated requests by the German manager. Although he cited age as a basis of his refusal, others took it as a sign of protest against the Nazi regime. Thus, on the 23rd of January 1939, the 35-year-old was found dead along with his girlfriend Camilla Cascagnola at her Vienna apartment. Although the official records attribute their deaths to accidental carbon monoxide poisoning, rumours persist of much more darker means. People have belief that he was targeted by the Germans, while others suggested that he and his girlfriend was took out by the Germans for harbouring Jewish sympathies. Matthias Sindelar is just one example of the awful atrocities caused in Europe in football between 1939 and 1943. Andreas Escobar. Earlier in this video, I highlighted the impacts of Narco ball, when Colombian international and club football was riddled with cartel violence. Andreas Escobar is the most damning and most disturbing example of this period in Colombian football. On June 22nd, 1994, Andreas Escobar, the captain of the Colombian men's national team, a widely respected player, scored an own goal in Colombia's match against the US at the World Cup. Colombia lost the game 2-1 and was eliminated from the tournament. 10 days later, on the early morning of July 2nd, Andreas Escobar was confronted by a group of men outside a club in his hometown, Medellin. The men taunted Escobar for the own goal. He was sitting in his car and he said the goal was a honest mistake. One of the men drew a .38 caliber pistol and shot Andreas Escobar 6 times and killed him. According to reports, the man yelled "goal" each time he pulled the trigger. The police the next day arrested the gunman involved, who was a bodyguard and a driver for the Gallen brothers, a pair of powerful criminals and drug traffickers. The Gallen brothers had reportedly lost large sums of money betting on the matches with Colombia at the World Cup. The Gallens ordered Humberto Castro Munoz, the gunman, to kill Escobar in retaliation. Escobar's funeral drew thousands of Colombians who flowed the car carrying his body on a 10-mile walk to the cemetery. A simple mistake, a simple own goal, cost a man his life. The Abyss. Port Said Stadium. On February 2nd, 2012, a riot broke out in Egypt at the Port Said Stadium between a match of Al Masry and Al Ahly. Thousands of Al Masry fans attacked the visiting supporters, in many cases with weapons. During the attack, police reportedly refused to open some of the gates, trapping fans and leading to more casualties. The opposition Al Ahly fans were trapped, which led to a stampede. Of this riot, 74 people were killed, and over 500 were injured during the riot. The intervening years had seen 73 people involved in the disaster, including 9 police officers and 2 Al Masry officials. After lengthy appeals from both sides, 21 of the defendants were acquitted, 41 received prison sentences, and 11 were executed. A quote from one of the surviving fans in the away end stated, "They stormed onto the pitch. They weren't celebrating, they were heading towards us. We could see the cops in front of us, and we thought they would stop them from attacking us. But we saw them step aside, the gate opened, and let the fans coming in like a storm. They were armed, sticks with nails in them, fireworks. It's like a nightmare. Every time I remember it." The events of what happened that day led to a 6-year ban on sports fans attending football games in Egypt. This ban was lifted on September 1st, 2018. Gate 12. On June 23rd, 1968, the Super Classico between River Plate and Boca Juniors took place. The match itself led to a 0-0 draw. At full time, the visiting Boca fans made their way down from the position in the upper Tribuna Centenario towards the ill-fated Gate 12. In spite of the blocked Gate 12, supporters continued to pour down the poorly lit stairwell, crushing those who had already arrived at the bottom. 71 people died and over 150 injured. Of the 71 supporters, most were teenagers, and the average age of people involved was just 19. The families of those in this incident never received any explanation, and certainly no one was held accountable for what happened that day in the Monumental. The accounts of what happened was varied. Some accounts suggest that Boca fans had thrown burning river flags from the upper tier, which caused a stampede in the tier below, while others claim that river fans had entered the Boca section and prompted a rush down the stairs to the exit. Neither of these are confirmed, and no one can explain why Gate 12 was locked in the first place. Kanjuruhan Stadium. On the 1st of October 2022, a match was played between Amina FC and Persebaya Surabaya. Following a loss by homeside Arema, around 3,000 Arema supporters invaded the pitch. The police attempted to protect the players and stop the riot, but the crowds clashed with the security forces. Riot police units deployed tear gas, which triggered a stampede of people in the stadium trying to escape from the effects of the gas. A crush formed at an exit, resulting in fans losing oxygen. 135 people lost their lives, and 583 others were injured. The disaster is the second most fatal in the history of football. Later that year, the Indonesian police chief announced 6 suspects who were part of security and the police force, charged for negligence and for the use of tear gas. The fans that ran to avoid the tear gas, many of the gates were locked, except Gate 14, which led them to their fate. The youngest person involved was 3 years old, many was in their teens. A shocking event in the modern era due to police negligence, a truly dark day in football. Estadio Nacional. The darkest day in the history of football occurred at the Estadio Nacional in Peru On the 24th of May 1964, a match between Peru and Argentina took place. An unpopular decision by the referee outraged the Peruvian fans who invaded the pitch. Police retaliated by firing tear gas into the crowd, causing a mass exodus. This was to allegedly prevent further fans from entering the field of play. Rather than standard gates, the stadium had solid corrugated steel shutters at the bottom of the tunnels. These shutters were closed as they normally were at every game. Panicked spectators moving down the enclosed stairways pressed those in the lead against the closed shutters. This was not visible to the crowd pushing down the stairwells from behind. The shutters finally burst outward as a result of pressure. From this event, 328 people died, including over 500 people injured. I am truly stunned that I have only just learned of this event today, and this is the worst part. The fatalities from this day is higher than Hillsborough, Bradford Fire, Heysel, Ibrox 1997, and Ibrox 1902. To this day, the worst event in football history. And that is the end of the video. I know that this got quite dark, however I did add a disclaimer at the start that it wasn't going to be a fun one. Just like many aspects of life, people hold a morbid curiosity to many events. Of course, rest in peace to the people involved in this video, and their families have found some aspect of closure. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for the love on the channel. If you would want a part 2, then tell me down below in the comments of what topics do you want me to cover next. Thank you for watching the darkest football iceberg, and I'll see you next time.